Coming up in our newscast tonight. During the first phone meeting since the North Korean delegates visited the South, President Moon Jae-in and his U.S. counterpart discussed ways to work towards inter-Korean talks, including sending a South Korean envoy to Pyongyang. South Korea holds a special ceremony for its squad competing in the Winter Paralympics. With President Moon and top government officials present, the athletes vowed to give it their all. Washington plans to impose tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, a shocking move in line with Trump's America First policy, which is already evoking strong negative responses from numerous countries, some vowing retaliation. NEWSCENTER begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea. Time for Arirang News Center, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Daniel Che. Welcome to our program. President Moon Jae-in plans to send a special envoy to North Korea. A detailed announcement could be made as early as next week. Our Chief Cheongwade correspondent Moon Gun-young starts us off with ongoing efforts to keep the peaceful momentum going.
South Korea will send a special envoy to North Korea to follow up on a visit by the sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to the South last month. That's what South Korean President Moon Jae-in told his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump during a late-night phone conversation Thursday, the first direct contact between the two leaders since the rare high-level visits by North Korea across the border in recent weeks. The presidential office suggested that decision was part of an effort to continue diplomatic momentum after a series of exchanges between the two Koreas around the Winter Olympics, which wrapped up on Sunday. Stating that Presidents Moon and Trump discussed the latest engagement between the two Koreas, the Blue House said the two allies agreed to maintain and push forward the momentum of inter-Korean talks and continue to make efforts towards denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. The White House released a similar statement hours later, but with a slightly different note, saying the two leaders noted their strong opposition that any dialogue with North Korea must be conducted with the explicit and unwavering goal of complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization. Mr. Moon, who advocates dialogue with the North to diffuse tensions, have urged both Washington and Pyongyang to give ground to allow for talks. In sending a special envoy to Pyongyang, the South Korean leader told the U.S. president that he'd be seeking to reciprocate for the senior delegation from North Korea, including the sister of the North Korean leader, which marked the first visit by a member of the North ruling bloodline since the Korean War in the early 1950s. She traveled with an invitation from her brother for President Moon to visit Pyongyang for an inter-Korean summit. The South Korean leader has not yet agreed to the summit, but observers say Seoul's dispatch of a special envoy to the north could clear the way for a potential summit between the two Koreas. Seoul has not identified who the special envoy would be or when the trip would take place, but sources in the Blue House say President Moon is looking at no later than mid-March to send north his envoy. Despite the developments, however, the situation in the Korean peninsula remains highly volatile, and the possibility of a breakthrough cross-border summit still murky, given the possibility of joint South Korea-U.S. military drills resuming after the PyeongChang Winter Paralympics, which runs from March 9th to the 18th. Moon Gun-young, Arirang News, the Blue House.
Meanwhile, in the domestic political arena, the nation's rival parties showed mixed reactions to the Moon Jae-in administration's decision to send a special envoy to North Korea. The ruling bloc calls it timely. The opposition firmly believe talks should only come under the premise of denuclearization. Kim Min-ji zooms in on the contrasting views.
The ruling Democratic Party of Korea welcomed plans to send a special envoy to North Korea, calling it a timely measure to maintain the peaceful atmosphere on the peninsula following the Olympics. The party added that Seoul should also send a special envoy to the U.S. afterwards to prepare for dialogue between Washington and Pyongyang. The main opposition Liberty Korea party, however, was critical, saying the latest move doesn't appear to be in line with the principle of denuclearization, and that it raises concerns that the two Koreas are headed into what it called fake peace talks. The Conservative Party also said that should the government dispatch an envoy, he or she needs to be someone who understands the severity of the security situation. The recently formed Paralympic party called for a special envoy to be sent to the U.S. first. The centrist party said President Moon Jae-in needs to show that his administration prioritizes close coordination with Washington. There have been concerns that the allies are divided over how to deal with North Korea, with the Moon administration pushing for dialogue and the Trump administration advocating maximum pressure. At a time when tensions between the rival parties are running high on North Korea issues, President Moon plans to meet with the leaders of the country's 5 main political parties to update them on the recent developments. The meeting is scheduled for next Wednesday, where it's expected that the president will discuss the outcomes of the PyeongChang Winter Games, as well as his meetings with delegates from North Korea and the U.S. It remains to be seen whether the leader of the main opposition party will attend, having already boycotted 2 such meetings in the past and calling for one-on-one talks with the president instead. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
When Seoul sends a special envoy to the north, this will be the first time the nation is doing that in more than a decade. Inter-Korean ties and Washington-Pyongyang talks are the likely topics, but as of now, it's unclear if denuclearization could be directly discussed. For details, let's turn to our Oh Jung-hee.
South Korea's special envoy that could be sent to North Korea as early as next week will be the first of its kind in over 10 years. Exactly who the envoy will be is not yet decided, but there are a few potential candidates. The frontrunners are Cho Myung-gyun, Seoul's unification minister, and Seo Hoon, the chief of South Korea's National Intelligence Service. The intelligence chief is seen to be at the center of mediating communication between Washington and Pyongyang. Both of them have visited Pyongyang several times, and South Korean President Moon Jae-in views them as figures that symbolize Seoul's willingness to improve ties with North Korea. Seoul's envoy could seek to discuss both inter-Korean ties and possible Washington-Pyongyang talks. But experts believe bringing up denuclearization directly could still be difficult.
Pyongyang has been refusing to denuclearize, so talking about denuclearization will be difficult. But we will be able to hear what North Korea wants from the U.S. and see how to set conditions for exploratory talks with Pyongyang.
After President Moon's phone conversation with U.S. President Trump on Sunday, Washington stressed any sort of dialogue with North Korea has to be aimed at denuclearization. Talks cannot be just for the sake of talks. Some think that such a difference in stances between Seoul and Washington on talking with North Korea could pose concerns over the strength of their alliance, but others believe South Korea could be a good communicator with Pyongyang, which has been isolated from the international community for years.
It has to be delivered to North Korea that things will become worse if it doesn't come out for dialogue with a plan to denuclearize. But that's difficult for the U.S. to do. So for Washington, it's not too bad to have South Korea talk with Pyongyang.
And for Seoul, steps to create a better environment for talks with North Korea cannot be delayed or slowed down, as South Korea-U.S. joint military drills are to take place in April, which could raise tensions on the peninsula. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
The excitement and the spirit of the Olympic Games lives on in PyeongChang, with the Paralympics coming up soon. The home team gathered for an inaugural ceremony, pledging to give it everything they've got. President Moon Jae-in and First Lady Kim Jong-suk were also there to rally the athletes on. Hwang Oh-jun has the highlights from that very event.
The South Korean squad for the PyeongChang Winter Paralympics was launched Friday afternoon. Its kickoff ceremony in downtown Seoul brought together the squad's delegation of 83 members, including 36 athletes, and some 180 guests, including the culture minister and South Korea's first couple. During the ceremony, President Moon encouraged the athletes and stressed how much he admires their hard work in overcoming challenges to become a member of the national team.
넘어지고 일어나기를 반복하며 오늘을 준비해 온 여러분은 그 어떤 순간에도 우리들의 영웅입니다.
President Moon said the athletes are already champions to him and to the rest of the nation, and he said he hopes the PyeongChang Winter Paralympic Games will become an opportunity to break the prejudice that people with disabilities need constant help. Whether or not one has a physical disability, President Moon said there's no reason why anyone can't inspire and give hope to others. He also pledged to cultivate and support the sporting environment in South Korea for people with disabilities.
우리나라를 세계에서 가장 장애인 스포츠가 활발하게 이루어지고 모범이 되는 나라로 만들고 싶습니다.
According to the Blue House, this was the first time a sitting South Korean president has attended the launching ceremony of the Paralympic squad. South Korea is hosting the quadrennial event for the first time since the 1988 Seoul Paralympics 30 years ago. The Games in PyeongChang will be the largest Paralympics ever, with 570 athletes from 49 countries set to participate. And South Korea is fielding its largest Paralympic squad to date, with the 36 athletes to compete in all 6 sports. Those sports are alpine skiing, biathlon, cross-country skiing, ice hockey, snowboarding, and wheelchair curling. Their aim is to win at least 1 gold, 1 silver, and 2 bronze medals and finish in the top 10. The PyeongChang Paralympic Games will run from the 9th to the 18th of March. Hong Woo-jun, Arirang News.
And the Winter Paralympics torch relay has kicked off with a week to go before the main event begins. The flame was lit in 5 different locations around the nation in Gwochang, Cheongdo, Anyang, Nonsan, and Jeju Island. The torches will tour these areas until they arrive in Seoul tomorrow evening and are joined together as one. It will be the first time the Paralympic torch has been in the Korean capital in 30 years since the 1988 Games. Over the next 7 days, it will be carried by some 800 runners, including current and former Olympic and Paralympic athletes and members of the public. The International Olympic Committee released a short documentary on the unified Korean women's ice hockey team. The 2-minute video, titled PyeongChang's Korean Legacy, features interviews with players and staff from both sides, reflecting on their experience at the end of the historic run. Although the team lost all 5 of their matches, the athletes forged a close bond and left a lasting impression as the world witnessed them in action. Head coach Sarah Murray said it was great to see that by the end, you couldn't tell who was from South or North Korea. The video is available on the Olympic Channel website. Countries hit by Washington's plans to impose tariffs on steel and aluminum imports have expressed regret over that particular decision. Some even threaten of possible retaliatory measures. Kim Mo-kyun sheds light on the possible prelude to trade wars.
Earlier on Thursday, U.S. President Trump made an announcement that shocked America's trading partners around the globe, stating that Washington plans to officially impose tariffs on steel and aluminum imports to the U.S. by next week.
It'll be 25% for steel, it'll be 10% for aluminum, and it'll be for a long period of time. We'll be signing it in, and you will have protection for the first time in a long while, and you're going to regrow your industries.
President Trump said the move is aimed at propping up U.S. industry and creating jobs for American workers. Following the announcement, Washington's major trading partners reacted angrily. China's foreign ministry criticized the notice, calling it unreasonable and excessive, adding that Beijing will take necessary measures to safeguard its legitimate rights and interests. Canada, the European Union, and the United Kingdom said they will bring forward their own countermeasures, while Mexico and Brazil even said they will respond through retaliatory steps. The Korean government remained guarded over its next move. Some say this is because steel and aluminum only make up a small portion of Korea's exports to the world's largest economy.
Most Korean manufacturers right now are selling to countries other than the United States. What we are selling to the United States are more specialty steel that you really can't get that much in the United States. So all the damage that we're going to get has been hit already.
Others say this could just signal the beginning of Trump's controls on trade, which could spread to other industries.
The effect upon Korean steel industry might not be as big, but implication is that United States can control, regulate trade, not just on steel and aluminum, but it could also control trade in other areas such as automobile parts, semiconductors, or the electronic products. So the implication is pretty immense.
Korea's Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy said it's currently looking into the situation, especially the background and motive behind Trump's latest tariff plan. However, until President Trump's decision is made final next week, the ministry said it will keep reaching out to the U.S. government and look for ways to minimize the impact. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
And due to concerns over Washington's latest protectionist decision, Korea's benchmark index dipped. However, some experts say this trend may not continue for a prolonged period of time. Park Ji-won shares with us their analysis.
Korea's benchmark stock index, the KOSPI, fell by over 1% Friday, finishing at 2,402, down more than 25 points from the previous session. During trading, it even broke below 2,390. Analysts say President Trump's announcement of hefty tariffs on steel and aluminum imports was a factor, but the Korean stock market's decline wasn't as steep as those in other Asian indexes.
Today's remarks from President Donald Trump regarding increased tariffs on the steel and aluminum hammered KOSPI. Today's KOSPI dropped to more than 1%, still made a good defense compared to the other Asian markets. Nikkei dropped to 2.5% and Hang Seng HSI index dropped to 1.5% nearly.
Overseas and institutional investors together sold some $500 million worth of shares on Friday. The steel and metal sectors were down more than 3%. But experts also think it represents a short-term correction in a market that's rallied 4 months, and that stocks won't be affected by the trade measures for long.
Donald Trump's policy has been already given to the market quite long ago, so it's nothing new. And in fact, the level of the tariff that they're putting on is less than previously anticipated. So in general, we think that yes, the trade war or protectionism is negative for the market, but overall economy as in general, they're probably adding productions in order to increase their domestic consumptions, and therefore a continuation of the fiscal and monetary policy expansion will be happening.
Experts said they anticipate global equity markets will start rising again by late March or mid-April. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
South Korea's industrial output recovered in the month of January. This comes on the back of improved production in the auto and semiconductor sectors, the traditional key drivers of the nation's growth. Kim Ji-yeon gives us a rundown of the encouraging digits.
Industrial output of overall industries in Korea increased 4.5% in January compared to the same period last year. Statistics Korea says output jumped 1.2% from the previous month, the steepest rate of increase in 10 months. It attributes the spike to increased production in the auto sector, which grew more than 12% on month thanks to releases of new models and a base effect stemming from sluggish auto exports to the U.S. and the Middle East. A rebound in the auto and semiconductor sectors helped boost output in the mining and manufacturing sectors, which grew 1% from the previous month in January, the first on-month increase in 3 months. Retail sales also spiked 1.7% from the previous month on increased output of automobiles and durable goods. A rebound in the auto sector also helped to boost facility investment, which rose by more than 6% from the previous month, the fastest rate of increase in 10 months. Production in the services sector also jumped 0.8% compared to the previous month, mainly due to increased output in science and technology. However, output in the food and lodging sectors dropped 1.3% from the previous month, declining for the 4th straight month in January. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Elsewhere around the world, the Siberian weather system continues to stretch across parts of Europe, taking lives and causing travel disruptions. As the mercury dips below freezing, various nations are bracing for the impact of the phenomenon that's highly unusual in that continent. Park Hye-jun gets us up to speed with the developments.
A deadly Siberian cold front, the so-called Beast from the East, continues to grip Europe, claiming at least 55 lives. Poland has suffered the most weather-related deaths with 21, followed by 7 in Slovakia. According to the World Health Organization, the poor and homeless are expected to be the worst hit. It said in a statement that elderly people, children, and people who have chronic diseases or physical or mental limitations are usually most vulnerable to the freezing cold. Severe snowstorms and blizzards have been paralyzing transportation networks. The BBC reported on Thursday that flights in and out of Dublin Airport were cancelled due to heavy snowstorms, and full services are not expected to resume until Saturday at the earliest. Geneva Airport was also forced to close for several hours on Thursday morning. Eurostar suspended 4 of its international rail services connecting London, Paris, and Brussels, with further cancellations announced for Friday. Roads, schools, and hospitals were also shut across the continent. The cold spell has been given various nicknames. The United Kingdom is calling it the Beast from the East, while the Netherlands calls it the Siberian Bear. In Sweden, it's being referred to as a snow cannon. Although some areas of Europe will see a rise in temperatures over the next couple of days, the chaos is expected to continue in Ireland and parts of southern England, where weather authorities forecast more icy weather as Storm Emma moves up from Portugal and France. Park Ki-jun, Arirang News.
Back here in the nation, temperatures are steadily rising, but so are fine dust levels. Special care must be given these days as the number of people suffering from dry eye syndrome also peaks around this time of the year. Lee Jung-yeon explains further.
Spring has kicked in, and as thick smog comprised of yellow dust or fine dust particles blankets the nation, the number of patients suffering from dry eye syndrome jumps noticeably across the nation. According to data by Health Insurance Review and Assessment Service, the number of patients diagnosed with dry eye syndrome has steadily increased since 2014 by 6% over the course of 3 years. In particular, March is when the number of patients increases significantly compared to other months of the year. In March of 2016 alone, the number of patients surpassed 330,000. Gender-wise, almost 68% of patients were women, more than double the proportion of men. In terms of age group, those in their 50s and 60s took up almost 40%. The symptoms of dry eye syndrome can range from bloodshot eyes to more extensive ones, such as whole-body fatigue and migraine. Besides age, dry eye syndrome can be triggered by extensive use of smartphones and other electronic devices, or certain pills, such as antibiotics or anticonceptive medication. Among the many factors, however, yellow dust and fine dust particles carrying germs and pollution could be especially detrimental to optical health. As preventative measures, doctors recommend staying indoors or using eye drops, blinking frequently when reading for extended periods of time, and massaging the eyes with a wet, warm towel. Lee Jung-yeon, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Park at the Weather Center for the updates you need before planning the weekend. Michelle, the full moon is up in the sky now, but it's not just any full moon. It is the first full moon of the Lunar New Year.
Now, that's right. Now, it's called 정월 대보름 in Korea. Now, traditionally, people used to make wishes upon this 대보름. And if you were making plans to wish tonight, conditions couldn't be any better. But keep in mind that the temperature is dropping very quickly as we speak. Now, the daily temperature gap is still very wide, with the daily highs tomorrow to reach even higher than 10 degrees Celsius, and a huge difference from the negative readings that we had this morning in Seoul. Now, tomorrow the capital will begin the morning at 0 degrees Celsius. Daegu is also reaching up to 0 degrees, while Busan hits 6 degrees. Now, Saturday afternoon in Seoul will go up to 12 degrees, while Gwangju and Busan rises to 15 and 14 degrees respectively. Temperatures remain spring-like for the time being, but cloudy conditions will linger tomorrow, leading up to rain over on Sunday. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
This is where we wrap up our Friday night's edition of Arirang News Center. Wherever you may be tuning in from, thank you for staying with us. Have an incredible weekend.